So how would you use server-side SvelteKit to build a to-do list using fetch requests on the client to grab data from the server side that can then be stored in a database? We're going to check that out today in this tutorial video. Stick around. Hello YouTube. My name is Braden Gerard, and today we're going to build a to-do list using SvelteKit so that I can demonstrate how you would use fetch on the client as well as server-side routes to save information out to a database and then retrieve that information back to your front end. We're going to be looking at both the client side of Svelte as well as the server side, and we're going to be using them in combination with Tailwind to build ourselves a SvelteKit to-do list. So let's jump into the content and take a look at how we can do this using SvelteKit. Okay, so far I have a SvelteKit to-dos folder with nothing inside of it except for a .environment file, which is going to be my MongoDB URI and my MongoDB DB name. Okay, so you need to set up a Mongo database for this project. I'm not going to go through how to do that because it's not going to be part of this to keep it short, but know that you need a MongoDB URI and a MongoDB file or a database file name inside of a .environment file at the root of your project directory. So we're going to generate a new SvelteKit project. So svelte at next. And it's going to say the directory is not empty. That's fine because we know it's just the .environment file. No, I don't want TypeScript. And I'll do regular CSS. And then we're going to do npm install to install all the dependencies. Now there is two other dependencies that we're going to need for this project. We're going to need the MongoDB node module, and we're also going to need the .environment module, which will allow us to pull in the data inside of this .environment file. Now, you're going to notice that these dependencies get added to the dependencies here in our package.json. Now, in order for these to actually work properly with the new ESM modules, we have to make a slight tweak here in our Svelte config. We need to go here and we need to say, instead of no external, change this to external, so that it allows external npm dependencies from our package.dependencies here, which is in our package.json here. Okay, that will allow you to import both MongoDB and .environment inside of our SvelteKit JavaScript files. So make sure you make that change. And we also want to install Tailwind for this project. So Svelte has a community repository that allows developers to create easy sort of setups for different common frameworks that need to be added to SvelteKit projects. And that repository is called SvelteAdd. And inside of the SvelteAdd repository, there's already a generator for Tailwind.css, or Tailwind CSS, sorry. So we can simply say npx SvelteAdd Tailwind CSS, and that will add Tailwind to our project automatically, so that we have Tailwind for our styling. Now, I'm not going to do a ton of styling in this because, like always, I like to show you guys the actual JavaScript functionality, and I don't want to waste too much time styling. But you will see that Tailwind is working in this project, and we can do some basic Tailwind styling. Now, we also need to install the Tailwind dependency. So you'll see that it's now here in our dev dependencies. So we need to say npm install. And you'll notice that after we run that Tailwind generator, we now have a Tailwind config file. We also have a post-CSS config file to set up Tailwind. Okay, so that's all good. Now, if we run our project, so this is just the default project, we should see in our browser the default SvelteKit project, and it should be using Tailwind. So if I refresh this here, we'll see this svelte.dev is underlined and it's in blue, and you can notice the fonts are a little different. If I go over to our code and we go look at, hold on a second here, and we go look at the default route of index, we can see that we have text blue 600 and underline on this svelte.dev link, so it is indeed working. You can also see that in here we have all applies from Tailwind in our CSS, and those are all being applied. Okay, so we are now using Tailwind. We will, I guess, leave the default styling. This is fine. We will take out the counter. We'll leave the title. We'll just call it my to-dos, and we'll take out this paragraph tag for now, and remove the counter import as well as remove the counter component. Now you'll notice that components are now inside of a lib folder. In some of my previous videos, this folder was called the components folder. Okay, so just pay attention to that when you're importing components now. You're going to be importing them from $lib, okay, / and then whatever the name of your file is. You can also put other modules in here or JavaScript files that you create, and we'll do that in this video in the lib folder. So it's a bit more robust. It's not just for components. So let's get to it then. First, let's create some server routes where we can hit those server-side routes to save stuff to our database and retrieve stuff from our database. Okay, so we haven't looked at server-side routes yet in any of my videos. SvelteKit allows you to do server-side API routes, and you can simply create those by creating a .js file anywhere in the routes folder. Okay, so if it's a .svelte file, it'll be rendered out as a page. If it's a .js or TS, if it's a TypeScript project, that will be rendered out as a API endpoint or a server-side route. So you can do stuff there like database access and have private data there because that is on the server side. So we can make a new folder here, and we'll just call this ToDos. And inside of there, let's make an index.js file. Okay, so this is going to be, if you just go to /ToDos, it'll be hitting that API endpoint. And in here, we can create multiple functions, one for each type of request, whether it's a get, post, put, delete. And then whenever we go to /ToDos, depending on the type of request, it will call that specific function. So if you ever worked with serverless functions before, this is similar to how serverless functions work. So it's very straightforward. All you have to do is say export async function, and then if it's a get, if the name of the function is get, then your get request will go there, and that function can take a couple parameters. Today we're just going to use the request parameter, so that's all we need to worry about, and then you can simply return whatever you want here, but the return body that it's expecting has to have a status, okay, so 200 if everything went well, and also a body, which is an object that it will return with data from the request being returned. So in this case, we'll just return some text for now. Body to do. Okay, and that's the get function. We are also going to need a post function. So if we send a post request to /ToDos, it will hit this function. We can also create a put, and if we send a put request, it'll hit that function, and we can create a delete, so that if we send a delete request, it will hit that function. Now notice we get an error here. Delete is a reserved keyword in JavaScript, so you actually have to use the short form, which is del, and that's the name of the function that SvelteKit recognizes. Okay, so now we basically, when we hit our gets, our posts, our puts, or our deletes, we're going to be getting data in the request. Okay, so in our request, we're going to want to get the, for the get, we're going to want to check whether or not we want to get all to-dos back, or just the, or sorry, not all to-dos, but whether we want to get the completed to-dos back or the incomplete, right? So on our main to-do screen, we're going to show the ones that are incomplete, and then maybe we'll have a screen that shows the completed to-dos. So that should probably come in as a query parameter on the /ToDos. So something like /ToDos question mark completed, and we'll say if that's equal to true or false. So we can get that from the request object. We can say const completed, and then we can make it equal to request dot, and then inside of that request object, there's something called query, which gets us our query, URL query parameter object, and we can say query.get, and then we can say we'll get the query parameter completed, and we'll actually get this as a Boolean. So this is just going to get us the string value of what completed is equal to in our query parameters, but we want to check if that is equal to the string of true, and if it is, then we will set completed to true. If it's not, we'll set completed to false. Okay, just do an inline operator there, and now we have our completed from the query parameter. So let's just do a little test here to make sure everything's working. So I'm going to return whether it was completed or not. So we'll just say completed here, and we'll return completed. Okay, and if everything's working, we should be able to call /ToDos, and we should be able to put a query parameter of completed equals true or false, and we should get that result back here. So let's go back over to our browser, and let's say /todos question mark completed equals, we'll say true, and we get completed true back as our JSON data. Great. And if we say completed false, we get completed false back. Perfect. So far everything's working. Our server route is working, and we are getting the proper data back. So let's just jump right into it here and get all of these routes completed. So that's, I think, all we need for our GET request, which is just going to get us all our to-dos, and it'll either get us the completed to-dos or the incomplete to-dos. The next thing that we need to do in getting all of our to-dos is actually going to the database and getting them. So to go to the database and get them, we're going to use Mongo database. Now, we could create the Mongo database connection here, but then we have to create it also here, here, and here, or we have to create it at the top of the file. Either way, every time one of these routes gets called, the database is going to be reconnecting. Now, this can become an issue in a serverless environment. If you have a lot of people hitting your endpoints, it can start creating a whole bunch of connections to the database. And once that connection limit gets reached, which isn't really that high on a lot of databases, I think when I was looking at this stuff, Mongo was like anywhere between 20 to 100 connections, depending on the settings, and the database would start rejecting connections. So you don't want that to happen. You want your database to be able to scale. So it's better to set up a connection in an external JavaScript file, import that file as a module, and Node will cache that data in that file. So your variables will be cached and your connection will stay open. Now this works by default in production environment of Node. In development with hot reloading and whatnot, there is a bit of an issue with this where it doesn't actually cache it. So there's a little workaround where you can set it on the global variable, set the cache to the global variable, and then the global variable will hold on to it. So I'll show you how we do that. Now, I didn't come up with this code, so it was actually, I found it in the Next.js project because I took a look there because I knew Next.js has been around for quite some time and would probably have a solution to this, since this SvelteKit project is like Next.js where it's set up to be run serverlessly. So we'll make a db.js in our lib folder here. And then if we go over to the Next.js project, you'll see the Next.js project. They have in their examples folder with MongoDB, in the util folder, they have a mongodb.js file. This has a very good chunk of code here for setting up a database connection if it doesn't exist. If it does exist, just using the cache connection. And then a little workaround here, which they have commented here, to set the Mongo instance on the global variable so that it stays cached even in the development environment. So if we go back over to the code, we'll just paste that in. Now, process.environment, I'm not sure yet if this works in SvelteKit. I know there's a way to do this in Next.js so that it just works. It may be working, but to be on the safe side for the purpose of this video, I'm actually going to use the library of .environment that we've already installed. And then let me know down in the comments if you have a better way of importing environment variables. I'll look into it as well. I'm hoping there's going to be a built-in way to do this in SvelteKit, but I haven't seen any documentation on it yet. So I'm going to import .environment, and then I'm just going to say .environment.config to set it up. And then that will allow us access to process.environment inside of our file here. We get our MongoDB URI, MongoDB name, and then basically just checks here if it's got the variables from the process.environment, good. And then it caches this Mongo object on the global variable, and it sets it up with a connection and a promise. And then it goes through and says if the promise is cached, or if it's not cached, set up a new connection. If it is cached, just return the cached copy. Okay, and then that returns us the client and the DB instance. So the DB instance will be all that we're actually using here. So we'll close this out, and we're going to import that into our routes file here. So we're going to say import connect to database. That's the function that is exporting at the bottom of that file, which actually does that check for if it's been cached or not and returns us the instance. And we're going to import that from $lib/db. And there's one more thing we're going to want to import here, which is the object ID from our MongoDB node module. Now, we'll use this after, but the reason we need this is because when we request data from the database based on an ID, we have to format it as an object ID so that Mongo will accept it when it's searching for items in the database by the ID. So we wrap our string IDs in this object ID and cast it to an object ID. Okay, so that is all we need to do to get our database set up. Now all we have to do here is say, open up a database connection, so const db connection, or get back a database connection, I guess, that's already been opened or cached. Connect to database. And then from that database connection, we're going to get the actual DB object out. So we'll say DB equals DB connection dot DB. And now that we have our DB, we can actually just do our DB operations. We can say await. Sorry, actually no. First we need to get the collection from the DB. So const collection is equal to db.collection. And then whatever we want to call our collection, so we'll just say ToDos. We'll call it SvelteKit. So that's going to be our collection, SvelteKit, sure, that we're going to save all our to-dos out to in our Mongo database. So now we can take that collection, so await on the collection, and we're going to find from that collection all of the completed. So I could say completed, completed, or we just use the single completed here since it's the same word, and we find all of the completed to-dos from that collection, and we're just going to send them to an array. Now this is all that MongoDB syntax from the MongoDB node module, so if you need to look this up, you can look up npm MongoDB and you'll find all the different methods that you can use here. But we're going to fetch all the to-dos that are completed or not completed if we determine that the query parameter is false here, or if there's no parameter provided, it will default to false, so it'll just return all the incomplete to-dos. And then once we get back all of our to-dos, we're going to return the to-dos, so body to-dos. And we can get rid of that, just like that. Now the other thing that we're going to want to do is catch any errors that we may get here. So let's wrap this entire thing in a try catch. So we'll say try, and we'll tab all this forward, and then catch error. And then if we do get an error, we're going to instead return an object with the status of 500 for a server error. And then we're going to say body, and we'll just give a generic message here. A server error occurred. Now, in a real-life application, you'd want to make this a little more robust, where it actually returns a proper error message. But for testing purposes, we're just going to do this for now. And if we need to, we'll console log out anything on the server here. So we save that, and that should do it for our GET request to get all of our to-dos. So if we go back here to our browser, and we can close this out now, we hit this to-dos, and we just don't specify anything. It should send us all incomplete to-dos, which is none right now because our collection doesn't have any to-dos in it. So let's go back here, and let's implement our post method so that we can then create a means for us to start creating to-dos. So inside of our post method, we are going to first get our DB connection just like we did above here, and then get the collection of SvelteKit to-dos. So we can take these 3 lines here and pop them down here. And then we will say that we want to try. Actually, we should wrap the whole thing in the try in case the DB connection, something fails with getting our DB connection here. Again, so we'll do that. We can copy out some of this code here just to speed things up for our catch. And now we have our collection here, so we want to do a collection dot insert one. So we want to insert one item, and it's going to be the to-do that we get from our post data, which we need to get here. We haven't done that yet. We're going to await that, obviously. And that should be, and then if that succeeds, we want to return, obviously, a status of 200 and a body of, we'll just send back status success. And you could send back the ID of the to-do or something like that. We're just going to send back success for now. And to get this actual to-do, what we want to do is we want to say const to-do is equal to request JSON.parse. It's important that you parse it to make sure we actually are getting a JSON object. JSON.parse, and then the request.body. Because you'll see on the client side, what we'll do is we'll stringify our JSON so that we make sure that it goes out in the request properly, and then we'll do a JSON.parse on the server to make sure we parse it back properly. And that should be it for our post. I'll save that. So now we should be able to create and fetch create and then fetch them. So that should give us enough to get started on our front end, and then we'll implement our update and delete methods here in a minute. So let's go back to our front end. Okay, so we've got this page. We have nothing on it right now except for our title. Maybe we should make a navigation with to come back to this page or to go to our completed to-dos page. Okay, so if I go back over here in our layout file, we will insert a nav component, which I still have to create, but we'll just flush this out first. So we'll import from lib /nav.svelte. Okay, and then we'll go over here to our lib and we'll create that file, nav.svelte. And in there we'll just do a nav with 2 links. And the first one to just go to the home page of the project, so my to-dos, and the other one to go to the completed page. And completed to-dos. Okay, and now we need to actually create the completed page. So let's go back over here to our routes, make a new folder called completed, and inside of there we'll make an index.svelte file, which will be where we show our completed to-dos. So for now, let's just put an H1 in there and say completed to-dos. And just for the sake of keeping things quick here, let's just copy the styles that we have on our main page and pop them over onto the completed page. Obviously, we would make like if we wanted to do this, we'd just put this in a global CSS file, but for this trial, I'm just going to copy this over. Okay, so now we should have a completed to-dos page, and we should have a nav that lets us navigate between the 2 pages because we've included that in our layout, which has a slot for the index as well as the subdirectory here of indexing the completed route. So that's all good. Let's see if we can, nav is not defined. Did I? Oh, import nav from, there we go. So now if we go back over to our page here, and is self-accepting of undefined. What is going on? Let me recompile here. Something broke, I think, because I imported that nav component before I created it. Something got funky. Okay, so I reboot here. I have the 2 buttons now, my to-dos and completed. I should probably separate these a little bit, but here we go, nav, and we'll put like a little bar in between them just so we know what's going on here. All right, we go back. Okay, so we go to my to-dos, that's this page. If I hit completed to-dos, it's my completed to-dos page. Okay, some weird styling, but that's fine. Okay, so in my to-dos, in the index.svelte, we are going to create a way to list off our to-dos as well as create our to-dos. So first, let's make a way to create our to-dos. So we're going to create an input where we can actually create the to-dos from that. So we'll go over to here and we'll say input, and then we will say type equals text. And we're going to bind this to the text, bind the value of it to our text variable. Okay, and in here we're going to have let text. And then we are going to close that. And that should be good. And then we'll also create a button that says add to do. Okay, and the button we're going to say on the click. We're going to call add to do. Whoops. Okay, and then over here we're going to make a function for that add to do. And that would be an async function. And we'll just, for now, console, or we'll do an alert so we can see it. To-do added. Okay, let's make sure this is working. Actually, let's add the text here. Okay, we'll try that out. So let's go back over, and can't even see our text field here. We got to give that a border. My to-do, to-do added. Okay, so our click listener is working great. Our bind is working perfect. So let's now give our, let's give our input a border. So input border 1 pixel solid black. There we go. Okay. We'll also give it a placeholder so we know what we want to put in here. So let's say placeholder equals enter a to-do. Perfect. And now there is one thing after this runs, we want the text to be cleared out. So we'll set this back to an empty string. And let's make it by default equal to an empty string. That way when they click add to do, we can check if it's an empty string. And if it is, then we don't want to do anything. So let's actually reverse this. Make it if text is not equal to an empty string, then we actually do something. So if we go back over here and we add our to-do, hello to-do added, okay, perfect, clears out our thing. What's up with our placeholder? We're not getting our placeholder. Did I make a typo? Placeholder. Placeholder equals enter a to-do. Weird. All right, not a big deal. Okay, so that is good. Now we can actually hit that put request that we put on the server. So to do that, we're going to say await. Or I guess we'll put a try around it first. Catch an error. And we're just going to alert the errors because we don't really have there was an error. We don't have a good way to handle them right now, and I don't want to take time doing that, so we'll just alert that there was an error. And in the try, we're going to say await fetch, and in the fetch request, we are going to do a post. So we're going to fetch to the /todos route. And then we are going to, inside of the object here for fetch, we will say that we want the method to be post. And we want the body of the post to be json.stringify. And we want to send the to-do that we are creating. Now, where are we going to get this to-do from? Okay, so let's actually create a to-do. So let's say to-do is going to be const to-do is going to be equal to, and then in here we're going to have a text for the to-do. Okay, so the text is going to be text. I guess we can just write text, and then we are going to need the completed status. We're going to say completed is false. And that should do it for the to-do, and then we create it. Okay, let's just see what the error might have been here. So if we go back and look at what I put 2 H's in my method here. Okay, so let's fix that. And if we go back now and we say feed the dog, and we send in that request. Okay, so nothing's happened yet. Let's just check and see if we have anything at /todos. We have the feed the dog. Okay, perfect. So it just looks like my view didn't update, which is sort of expected because I haven't really handled for updating our list yet whenever we add a to-do. It should just clear it out. It looks like I accidentally removed that. Hold on. So we should say text equals the empty string after we add the to-do. And same here, if there's an error, we still want to make text equal to the empty string. Okay, so that was my mistake. Somehow I removed that from the code. So let's go back here and we'll add one more to do. Go and get groceries and add the to do. Okay, so it disappears, perfect. And if we go and check our to-dos, we have 2 to-dos now. Perfect. So let's now go back to our code and actually show a way to display our to-dos in a list here. Okay, so we'll go back and we will create a to-dos list, so or array. So we'll say export let to-dos, because we're going to fetch these when we first load the page. So we're going to use a script with the context of module. Okay, and that allows us to then return a props with to-dos in it that will get sent to this Svelte component as a props right away once the page loads. So in here we can do our export async function, which is load, which is that function that gets called when the component gets initialized. And inside of load, there's a lot of different things that we can get out of the parameter that comes into load. We just need the fetch, so that allows us to do fetching on the server side. And there, you can get the page, the session, the context, but we're just going to use fetch, so we'll just import that. And now in here we're going to say result of our fetch equals await fetch, and then fetch our to-dos. So we're going to use that get request that we just made, so just / to-dos. And if we just do it like that, it'll do a get request. And then we'll say const res JSON result equals await res.json. So we'll get the JSON response out of that result. And then we will return the props object, which will have our to-dos in it. And we'll say JSON result dot to-dos, because remember we put them inside of a to-dos object in the body of that return. So we get the JSON result, we get the body object of to-dos, and we assign that to this to-dos props. So then when we export let to-dos here, to-dos will get passed in as a props to our page when it gets loaded. So now we have a to-dos list. So we can go down here into our code and we can create a list. So let's just maybe we'll just throw in a break here to separate it from our input. Great styling. And then we will say list. Okay, and for the list we're going to say each to-dos as a to-do, and then we'll close our each. Okay, and then we will say list item and to-do dot text. Okay, and we want to also put a checkbox with each of those so that we can check them off if we complete them. So that checkbox will be an input of type equal to checkbox, and we're going to bind the checked event to to-do dot completed. So that'll actually take our to-do and it'll mark it as completed, or mark completed as true if we check the box. And then we also want to then figure out a way to actually send in that completed to-do to the we want to send in that completed to-do to the server so that we can actually post it there, right? So then we're going to say on changed. Okay, so when this state of this changes, we're going to say call the add to do, or sorry, update to do, because we're completing it. So let's just call it complete to do. So we're going to call the complete to do, and we're going to pass complete to do a ID, or actually we'll just pass it the full to do that we want to update. So we're going to pass it the to-do that we've just checked, and the complete to-do method will just update the server and set our to-do in the database to be completed. So we can now go back over to, did I close this? No. So close that input. And then we need to, yeah, it's not defined, I know, so we go up here and we're going to make another async function, complete to do. And inside of this function, we are going to then do a put request to update the to-do so that it's now completed. So we're going to say await, always try catch, try, and then we'll just catch the error and alert it like we did here. await fetch. We'll make this ToDos /ToDos. Can't type right now. And then the method, spell that right this time, of put, and the body. So the body is going to contain the to-do that we want to update. JSON.stringify the to-do. Okay. And if all is good, then we shouldn't need to do anything, because what's going to happen, oh, actually, no, we do need to do something. We need to fetch our latest list of to-dos. Okay, so we're going to create one more method here. We're going to call it await, or async, sorry, function of fetch to-dos. Okay, and this will just be our way of manually fetching a new list of to-dos once we've completed a to-do, so that we get only the to-dos that are up to date and completed, or incomplete, sorry. To-dos const JSON res equals await. This way we can just make sure that the client's always up to date with the state of the server side and what's in the database. So to-dos is equal to our JSON response dot to-dos. So I went through this quickly, but that's just because I'm doing the exact same thing here that we did up in our on load, but we're just going to do it manually on the page whenever we feel like it. So we can now call this fetch to-dos right here after we do a successful update. And that should be the only time I think we would need. Oh, after we create a to-do as well. So after we create a to-do, we definitely want to fetch our to-dos again, just so we get the latest to-do with the proper IDs and everything from the database to-do that was created. So after we create a to-do, we'll also fetch the latest list of to-dos. So that will update our to-dos array every time we complete a to-do or add a to-do. We have the list here. It looks like we have everything done on the front end to add and check off to do. So let's try this out. Okay, so now we have our list with our to-dos. The styling, oh, hold on, I didn't do this correctly. We should actually have our input checkbox inside of our list item so that it can go side by side with our text here. And if we save that and go back, there we go. It looks a little better at least. And now if we check off one of these, it's not disappearing. Okay, let me just go check to make sure we did everything correctly with our checkbox. On change. Oh, this is the on change event, not changed. And if we save that and we go back now, we can, let's just get us out of this state. We can check that and server error. Oh, we can't do a put to the server because we haven't actually wrote the put method yet. Okay, so if we go back, now we need to implement our put server route, and we could also implement a delete server route at this point. We won't implement the delete server route because we don't actually need it for this. We're not gonna do a deleting to do just because I don't want this video to be too long, but you could if you wanted to. And I'll also show you at the end quickly how we could request a single to do if our app needed to. But let's implement the put method so that we can see how we would update a to do in our database. So we need to, again, I'm just going to copy this snippet of code, and we need to again set up a DB connection, get the collection, get the to do from the request body, and then we want to, instead of doing a insert one, we want to do a update, so collection.update, and then we're going to update the to-do with the ID of object ID, and then we'll go to-do dot underscore ID. So this dot underscore ID on the to-do is actually an ID that that Mongo generates. So any to-dos that we're getting back from our server will have this to-do ID. So we want to look for the underscore ID of object ID cast from the to-do underscore ID. Create another object with the set, $set, with an object inside of that of what we want to set on the to-do object. So completed, we want to set to true. Well, not true, I guess we want to set it to to-do.completed. So whatever the actual state is of the to-do. And then we can close out this request. So that would be how you would do an update on one attribute of the to-do object with the Mongo node library. And then we can return our status of 200, and we'll just say success again. So that should be fine. So we should be able to do an update now to actually update our to-do. So let's go back over here. Let's say that we fed the dog. And look at that, it gets updated, so the completed becomes true. We get our new to-dos back. We notice that that one's completed, so it doesn't actually get returned in our fetch request. And we have just the to-dos that are left. Okay, so finally, let's go and show all of our completed to-dos on our completed to-dos page. So if we go over to our completed to-dos page, all we have to do here is really just copy over what we were doing in the context module on our first page so that we can pull in all of our to-dos. But in this scenario, we actually want to pull in only the completed to-dos. So we're going to make a query parameter here, completed equal to true. And that should pull in our completed to-dos. Now we need to have another script here that does an export let to-dos. And then inside of our page, we will create a list. Again, we'll do a each to-dos as a to-do. Then we will close our else, or our each, sorry. And then inside of there, we will simply do a ul. And we'll actually, you know what? Let's get the checkbox from this page. We'll do it the same way with the checkbox, and we will now. I could actually break this out into a component. It would be smart if we were doing this a bit more efficiently. And then instead of having an on change, because we're not going to change these, we'll just make it disabled so that we can't actually change it. Okay, and then we have the bind of checked to-do.completed here to show that it's been checked so that we know that it's a completed to-do. So if we go back over here and check our page, we see that we just have the one to-do back that's disabled and it says feed the dog. If I go back to my to-dos, I can check off another one and we can go over to completed to-dos and it's now checked off. Maybe I have another to-do I want to add, do my homework, add that to-do, it gets added to the list. Okay, so that is a basic functionality of a to-do list implemented in SvelteKit. Now, maybe we want to get one specific to-do for some reason. Okay, so I'll show you how you would create the server route for that, just as a little bonus, because I know that's something that you typically would do quite often with server routes, is to get a single item from the database. So if we go over to our to-dos here, we could create a new file in here, and we could give it the name of slug in square brackets .js. And that will allow us to actually import whatever that slug is. So whatever / you go to after to-dos or whatever value you put in there, it'll actually be able to be used inside of this server route. Okay, so that's important because we can actually get specific IDs or something like that based off of the slug that someone provides. So the way that we can do that is we can just say import. Actually, we'll go over here and we'll copy some of this code over. So we're going to import both of these. And then we are going to, again, do a GET request. So we'll just copy this GET request for now to get us started. And we're going to get the ID from the request first, so we don't care whether it's completed or not here. Instead, we want to say const ID is equal to, and then you can go to that request object, and you can say request.params.slug, okay, and that will get you the whatever they put after the / on your server route of to-dos. So that we can save into the ID attribute. And then we set up our DB connection, get the DB, get the collection. And then on the collection, we can do a find one instead of a find. And you can find one based on the underscore ID. And we can cast that slug to an object ID with this ID here that we have. Okay, and then we don't need this to array because it's already a single item, and I'm missing a colon here. So we cast this slug ID to an object ID and check the database for the object with that ID. And then we can return, we'll just return that single to-do. Okay, so that's how you would then get just a single to-do back. So now if we want to go and test that out, I can go over to my browser here, and we can go and get all of our to-dos for a second. Or all of our incomplete to-dos, and we can grab one of these IDs, and then we can just go to / to-dos / the ID, and we should get back that single to-do. Let's just see here. A server error occurred. Okay, so what is the error on the server? Oh, I called this to-dos, and it should just be to-do. So we go back over here and we hit that, and then we get back that single to-do. So we just get back the to-do with that ID, the text, and completed. Okay, so that's how you could then request a single to-do if you wanted to, based off of a dynamic route here, which would hit a server endpoint. So that's pretty much all that I wanted to show you guys today for setting up a to-do list. This to-do list uses SvelteKit. It uses MongoDB on server routes with SvelteKit, and it also uses Tailwind for styling. My styling is terrible, but that's not the point of this video. I wanted to show you guys the functionality, and there it is. Hope you enjoyed. Thanks for sticking with me for another one of my SvelteKit tutorial videos. If you enjoyed this content, make sure to give that video a thumbs up so that YouTube knows to show it to other people, just like yourself. And if you really liked my content and you want to catch more of my SvelteKit tutorial videos or Svelte content in general, I'll be releasing tons of videos in upcoming weeks, so make sure you subscribe to the channel so you get notified whenever those videos come out. And thanks again for hanging out, and have a great day.